Most men fear being alone, but the few who don't, the few who walk into silence willingly, they come back different, colder, clearer, impossible to manipulate. And Machiavelli warned us about them, because a man who becomes comfortable in solitude doesn't just change himself, he changes the game. There's a version of you the world has never met, a colder, sharper, more deliberate self, unbothered by noise, unmoved by pressure, and uninterested in approval. You won't find him in comfort or distraction. You only discover him when you step back from the world and face yourself without anything to hide behind. Machiavelli would tell you that real strength doesn't come from feeling good. It comes from stripping away everything unnecessary, distractions, validation, even certain friendships, until you're left with nothing but your own mind. That version of you doesn't soften his ambition, doesn't ask for permission, and doesn't hesitate to cut off what slows him down. But you'll only become him when silence stops scaring you. Most men never get there. They crumble in solitude and run back to comfort. Don't be one of them. This video will show you why solitude isn't isolation, it's strategy. Why silence becomes a weapon, why stillness creates mental dominance, and why being alone shapes the most formidable version of yourself. Stay with this till the end, and you'll never look at solitude the same way again. People drift through life with cloudy vision, not because they're foolish, but because they're never alone long enough to see clearly. Surrounded by noise, they adopt beliefs that aren't theirs. They imitate, they comply, and worst of all, they lie to themselves because someone is always there to help them maintain the illusion. But the man who steps away from the noise loses the filters. The masks fall off, the lies dissolve, and for the first time, he sees the truth, a truth most people never encounter. That's why solitude isn't just helpful, it's dangerous. The clarity born from silence gives you an advantage over everyone still trapped in the fog. Machiavelli understood this better than anyone. When he was exiled, he didn't waste time complaining. He observed. He studied human nature without social filters, and he realized things most people never want to admit. That cowardice often hides behind morality, that loyalty shifts with convenience, that fear is more reliable than affection, and that people crave leadership so long as it's delivered skillfully. These truths are too blunt for polite society, but solitude forces you to confront them. Isolation sharpened Machiavelli's perception. It let him read people like moves on a chessboard. Now ask yourself, how sharp would your judgment be without the noise, without friends softening your flaws, without social media inflating your ego, without shallow conversations pulling your mind in every direction? Just you, your thoughts, reality, no escape. It's uncomfortable, but that discomfort is where clarity begins, and clarity is leverage. While others choose emotion, you choose strategy. While they chase temporary pleasure, you build long-term advantage. While they play roles society handed them, you rewrite your own script. Solitude doesn't just give you time, it gives you insight people can't handle. You begin to see who actually respects you, who fears you, who uses you, and who pretends to like you. You see the lies everyone else lives by, and the ones you told yourself. And when you stop lying to yourself, your power becomes real. Solitude exposes everything: your laziness, your ego, your dependencies, your fake goals. If you don't run from that truth, something rare happens. You stop needing approval and start needing clarity. And clarity gives you an edge over men still drowning in distraction. You'll see patterns they miss, weaknesses they ignore, power dynamics forming while they're lost in emotion. You become effective in a way most men never will. That's why many great men walked alone. Not out of bitterness, but because they valued truth more than noise. You can't find truth while performing for others. You only find it when there's no one left to impress. If you want vision instead of hype, if you want strategic power instead of surface-level success, if you want to see how the world actually works, you must step away long enough for your illusions to die. Most people aren't controlled by chains. They're controlled by dependence. Dependence on attention, validation, approval, affection. They can't think alone, move alone, or believe in themselves without backup. But the man who breaks that dependence becomes dangerous because he's no longer owned. He doesn't chase affection. He doesn't obsess over being liked. He doesn't wait for permission. He chooses himself, and that is the birthplace of real power. Solitude makes you self-sufficient, emotionally stable, and immune to manipulation. When others can't influence your emotions, they can't influence your decisions. That's why society teaches you to fear being alone, because a man who isn't afraid of solitude can't be controlled. Machiavelli understood that human behavior is driven by need, and needs create leverage. But the man who cuts off those emotional needs becomes untouchable kings, strategists, leaders. They all use solitude as a tool, not because they hated people, but because power requires distance. Familiarity weakens you. If you want strength, learn to walk alone. The man who walks alone moves faster, sees clearer, and acts without compromise. So what does solitude look like in real life? It's saying no to invitations that drain you. It's stepping away from relationships that bring comfort but no growth. It's accepting that being misunderstood is part of leveling up. It's choosing long nights of focus over meaningless talk. It's not glamorous, but it builds empires, both internal and external. Machiavelli didn't rise through flattery. He rose through ruthless observation, done in isolation. Ask yourself, can you detach from attention? Can you leave behind shallow bonds? Can you trust your own voice more than the crowd? If you can, you're already ahead of nearly every man alive. Most people live on approval, but the man who builds quietly, who thinks independently, who moves alone, that man becomes a threat. Not because he tries to be, but because he's free. He doesn't need anything, and that is why he can gain everything. Modern society glorifies constant connection, yet real power grows in silence. When Machiavelli lost everything, he didn't beg for acceptance. He disappeared and returned with a manuscript that changed history. He didn't need an audience. He needed distance. Because crowds cloud your mind. Solitude clears it. When you're always surrounded by others, you absorb their fears, limits, and confusion. Solitude breaks that spell. It lifts you above the noise. Judgment sharpens. Vision strengthens. You become harder to manipulate, harder to deceive, harder to shake. That's why great men retreat before they rise. It's not running away. It's refining themselves. You can't sharpen a blade in chaos. You can't sharpen your mind in noise. Today's world is addicted to stimulation. That's why most people never think for themselves. Silence transforms your thinking from reactive to strategic. Machiavelli's greatest ideas came from exile. Not comfort, not recognition, but silence. Noise creates emotional decision makers. Silence creates strategists. Guard your attention. Protect your mental space. Silence is concentration, depth, power. The man who thinks deeply and moves precisely becomes rare, a strategist among reactors. Time is more valuable than money, and most people waste it reacting. But the man who walks alone commands his time, and time, when controlled, becomes a weapon. 1 year of focused solitude can put you 5 years ahead of the distracted man. Power is quiet. The world's true movers don't announce. They disappear, re-emerge, and shift reality. If you want to rise, protect your time. Cut noise, guard your mornings, disappear often. The man who builds alone sets the pace others must chase. If you want vision, if you want strategic power, if you want to understand the world, you must detach until your illusions die. And when they die, you return transformed, not just acting differently, but seeing differently. At that point, you don't follow power, you wield it.